The boy in white did not choose Victor because Victor was special. He chose Victor because Victor was useful. And that difference could completely change how we understand the most mysterious character in From. For years, we assumed the boy in white was Victor's protector. The strange child appeared when Victor was completely alone, guided him toward food, helped him survive, and eventually returned decades later whenever something important was about to happen. But Season 4 gives us the most disturbing clue yet. When Victor is standing at the graves of Miranda and Eloise, terrified that something is wrong with Henry, the boy in white appears again. And this time, he doesn't simply comfort Victor. He gives him an order. He tells Victor that the others are going to uproot the bottle tree. And he tells him they cannot do it. Victor believes him immediately. Not because he understands the reason, because he has spent almost his entire life believing that this boy knows things he doesn't. And that is exactly what makes this relationship so dangerous. Because here is the question nobody should be ignoring. Why did the boy in white choose Victor in the first place? Not why does he help Victor? Why Victor? Why a traumatized child? Why someone who spent decades trapped inside this place? And why does the boy in white continue appearing to Victor even when Victor himself doesn't fully understand what is happening? Look at what the show is actually telling us. Victor arrived in the town as a child during one of its greatest catastrophes. He survived when almost everyone else around him died. That alone makes him different. But there is another detail. Victor doesn't just remember the town. He remembers it wrong. He buried memories because remembering became too painful. He turned terrifying events into drawings. He counted trees. He created routines. He talked to objects. He transformed loneliness into survival. And Season 4 makes this even more important. Victor explains that after everyone died, the boy in white appeared and helped him survive. He showed Victor where food was hidden. He taught him that loneliness itself could become dangerous. Victor responded by creating companions from whatever he could find. That sounds like kindness. But what if it was something else? What if the boy in white wasn't simply teaching Victor how to survive? What if he was teaching Victor how to remain psychologically intact inside the system? Because Victor became something incredibly valuable. A living memory. A person who could remember what happened before everyone else arrived. And that may be the real reason the boy in white chose him. This is where the theory gets darker. The town repeatedly destroys people's memories, perceptions, relationships, and sense of reality. But Victor survived by preserving fragments, drawings, locations, objects, patterns, stories. Even when he couldn't explain what they meant, he kept them. That makes Victor different from almost everyone else. Jade sees symbols. Tabitha sees visions. Julie experiences time. Sarah hears voices. But Victor? Victor remembers. And in a place where memory appears to be part of the mechanism, that makes him extremely important. The boy in white may not have needed Victor to understand the mystery. He needed Victor to preserve it. That's why the childhood relationship matters so much. The boy in white didn't simply walk into Victor's life after the massacre. He became one of the few constants Victor had left. And once Victor trusted him, that trust lasted for decades. Think about how powerful that is. If someone appears to you when you're a terrified child, gives you food, keeps you alive, and repeatedly proves that he knows things you don't, eventually you stop questioning him. You listen. Victor listens. Even when he doesn't understand. And that is exactly what happens in Season 4. When the boy in white warns Victor about the bottle tree, Victor doesn't ask for proof. He doesn't demand an explanation. He immediately tries to stop everyone. But here's what changes everything. Victor is no longer the only person who has access to the truth. Tabitha and Jade have discovered that their connection to the town goes far deeper than they imagined. Julie can move through time. The children are connected to the origins of the place. The bottle tree is tied to the town's deeper mythology. And the residents are finally starting to understand that escaping this place may require interacting with its rules rather than simply surviving them. So suddenly, Victor's role changes. For years, he was the keeper of the past. Now the others are beginning to uncover that past for themselves. And that creates a terrifying possibility. Maybe the boy in white chose Victor because Victor was supposed to keep the truth hidden until the right people arrived. Not forever. Just long enough. That's why Victor's memories are so important. That's why the drawings matter. That's why the boy in white keeps returning. And that's why the bottle tree warning is so suspicious. Because the boy in white doesn't explain what will happen if the tree is removed. He simply tells Victor to stop them.
Why?
If the boy in white truly wants everyone to escape, shouldn't he explain the danger? Shouldn't he help them? Shouldn't he appear to Boyd? Or Jade? Or Tabitha? Instead, he communicates through Victor. And that creates the biggest contradiction surrounding him. The boy in white acts like a protector, but his information is always incomplete. He appears at critical moments. He gives warnings. He points people towards certain paths, but he rarely gives them the full picture. That isn't necessarily the behavior of a hero. It could be the behavior of someone following rules. And this is where Victor becomes even more important. Maybe the boy in white isn't free to directly interfere. Maybe he can only influence specific people. Maybe Victor was the first person capable of seeing him because Victor's mind was already connected to the town in a way other people weren't. Or maybe the truth is even worse. Maybe the boy in white didn't choose Victor because Victor could escape the town. Maybe he chose him because Victor was the one person who could survive long enough to remember what the town wanted forgotten. And if that's true, then Victor's entire life suddenly looks different. The loneliness, the drawings, the memories, the boy in white, the obsession with trees, the fear of the past. None of these things are random anymore. They become pieces of one design. Victor was never simply the strange man who happened to survive. He may have been the town's memory keeper. And the boy in white may have been the one who made sure that memory survived. But then we reach the most disturbing question. If the boy in white chose Victor to preserve the truth, why is he now telling Victor to stop the people who are finally uncovering it? That is where the entire relationship changes. Because perhaps the boy in white isn't protecting Victor from the town. Perhaps he is protecting the town from what Victor is about to remember, but perhaps the most important evidence isn't what the boy in white tells Victor. It's what happens around Victor whenever the boy in white appears. The pattern is almost impossible to ignore. The boy in white doesn't appear during ordinary moments. He appears around turning points. Moments when Victor is about to discover something. Moments when an old memory is resurfacing. Moments when someone is approaching a truth that could change the entire balance of the town. And that makes his relationship with Victor feel less like friendship and more like intervention. Think about Victor as a child. Everyone around him is gone. The town has become a graveyard. There is no community left to explain what happened. No adults to teach him what is real. No one to tell him which memories are safe to trust. Then the boy in white appears. A child. Someone who looks harmless. Someone who doesn't behave like the monsters. And Victor follows him. That sounds innocent. But psychologically, it creates something much deeper. Victor's entire understanding of the town becomes connected to this one figure. If the boy in white says something is dangerous, Victor believes it. If the boy in white leads him somewhere, Victor follows. If the boy in white disappears, Victor waits. And after decades, that childhood trust has never completely disappeared. That's important because From repeatedly shows us that belief is power. People see things because they believe. They remember things because they are emotionally connected to them. They become trapped by fear, guilt, hope, and trauma. The town doesn't simply attack bodies. It attacks perception. And Victor may be the perfect person for that environment because his entire survival mechanism is based on one thing: trusting patterns that nobody else can see. This is why his drawings matter more than they initially appeared to. Victor doesn't draw because he's artistic. He draws because he is trying to store information outside his own mind. He knows that memories can disappear. He knows that terrible events can become confused. So he creates physical evidence. A drawing becomes a backup memory. A tree becomes a marker. A location becomes a warning. An object becomes a reminder. Victor has essentially built his own external memory system. And if the boy in white understood Victor's psychology, then choosing him was brilliant. Because Victor could preserve information for decades without even knowing why it mattered. That's not protection. That's preparation. But here's where it gets darker. What if Victor wasn't chosen simply because he could remember? What if he was chosen because he could forget? That sounds impossible. But think about it. Victor's forgotten memories are not empty spaces. They are locked rooms. And whenever something forces those memories open, pieces of the town's history return. The massacre, the children, Miranda, the bottle tree, the boy in white. The past keeps leaking into the present through Victor. Which means Victor's damaged memory may actually be part of the mechanism. The town needed someone who could carry the truth without fully understanding it. Someone who could survive the information. Someone who wouldn't immediately destroy the system by revealing everything. Victor fits that perfectly. And suddenly, his relationship with the boy in white looks almost like a long-term experiment. The boy in white gives Victor fragments. Victor survives. Victor remembers. Victor forgets. Then, years later, another fragment appears. And the cycle continues. That's why the boy in white may be less interested in explaining the town than in controlling when Victor remembers it. This is the detail everyone missed. The boy in white rarely gives Victor complete answers. He gives him just enough. Enough to survive. Enough to move. Enough to reach the next piece. But never enough to understand the entire machine.
Why?
Because maybe understanding the entire machine is dangerous. Or maybe because the boy in white himself doesn't control everything. And that possibility is even more terrifying. What if the boy in white is not the master of the town? What if he is simply another prisoner? That would explain something very strange about him. He appears powerful, but he behaves limited. He can guide. He can warn. He can appear. But he doesn't simply walk into town and destroy the monsters. He doesn't rescue everyone. He doesn't tell Victor how to leave. He doesn't explain the children. He doesn't reveal the full history. His power seems enormous, but his freedom seems almost non-existent. And if that's true, Victor may be important because he is the boy in white's only reliable bridge to the living world. Think about the symbolism. Victor is an adult carrying the mind of a traumatized child. The boy in white is a child carrying knowledge that seems older than the town itself. They are opposites. Victor is an old survivor who cannot escape his childhood. The boy in white is a child who appears to understand a world far older than himself. And somehow, these two characters keep finding each other. That cannot be accidental. The show is constantly connecting childhood with the deepest mysteries of the town. The children in the tower. Victor's childhood. The boy in white. The memories of the past. The reincarnation-like patterns surrounding Tabitha and Jade. Again and again, the story tells us that the answers are buried in what happened before the current residents arrived. And Victor is the living witness to that forgotten era. That makes him more valuable than anyone realizes. Because Tabitha can discover clues. Jade can interpret symbols. Boyd can fight monsters. But Victor can say, "I've seen this before." And in From, that sentence may be more powerful than any weapon. Now look at the bottle tree. The tree isn't simply another strange object. It represents memory. Messages trapped inside bottles. Numbers. Connections. A physical object storing information that otherwise shouldn't exist. And who is the character most obsessed with preserving information? Victor. That's not the real mystery. The real mystery is why the boy in white suddenly becomes concerned about that tree being disturbed. If the tree is connected to the deeper structure of the town, then Victor's job may have always been connected to protecting information. The boy in white doesn't tell Victor to destroy the tree. He tells him to leave it alone. That distinction matters, because it suggests the tree has a function. Maybe it's a doorway. Maybe it's an anchor. Maybe it's a memory storage system. Or maybe it's something that connects different points in time. And Victor is being used as the person who keeps that connection intact. But if the residents destroy or move the tree, they may accidentally break a rule they don't understand. And that's when Victor's greatest strength becomes his greatest weakness. He trusts the warning, but he doesn't know the reason. So Victor becomes trapped between two worlds. The people he loves want answers. The boy in white wants something preserved. And Victor doesn't have enough information to know which side is actually telling him the truth. This is where the theory reaches its most dangerous point. Maybe the boy in white chose Victor because Victor was never meant to solve the mystery. He was meant to keep it alive. For decades. Until the next generation arrived. Until Tabitha arrived. Until Jade arrived. Until Julie's abilities began changing the rules. Until someone finally became capable of asking the questions Victor could never ask. And if that is true, then Victor's entire existence in the town was part of a waiting game. The boy in white didn't need Victor to escape. He needed Victor to wait.
And Victor did exactly that.
For decades. Until the right people came. But here's the terrifying part. If Victor's role was to preserve the mystery until the right people arrived, then who decides who the right people are?
And why?
Because if the boy in white chose Victor, perhaps Victor isn't the final choice. Perhaps he was only the first. And that means the next person the boy in white chooses could be the person who finally discovers what Victor was protecting all along. And this is where everything comes together. The boy in white may not have chosen Victor because Victor was destined to escape. He may have chosen Victor because Victor was destined to remember. For decades, Victor has carried pieces of the town's history without understanding how those pieces fit together. He remembers the trees. He remembers the massacre. He remembers the tunnels. He remembers the people who disappeared. He remembers things that everyone else has no way of knowing. And now, the most important question is no longer why Victor remembers. It is why the town allowed him to survive.
Think about that.
Victor was a child when the massacre happened. Everyone around him was killed. Yet, Victor survived. He remained alone in the town for years. He watched new people arrive. He watched them die. And somehow, the system never completely removed him. That doesn't necessarily mean Victor was protected by the town. It could mean something much more complicated. Victor may have been necessary. And if he was necessary, then the boy in white may have known that from the beginning. This completely changes the meaning of their first encounters. The boy in white wasn't simply showing a frightened child where to find food. He may have been establishing a relationship that would last for decades. A relationship built on one thing: trust. Because trust is more powerful than information. If the boy in white had told Victor everything when he was a child, Victor probably wouldn't have understood it. But if he slowly guided him, if he gave him fragments, if he appeared only when necessary, then Victor would become dependent on those appearances. And that seems to be exactly what happened. Victor doesn't fully understand the boy in white, but he trusts him. And in a place where nobody knows what is real, that trust becomes almost sacred. Yet Season 4 introduces something that threatens this entire relationship. Victor is remembering more. The people around him are asking harder questions. The past is no longer staying buried. And the bottle tree may be one of the strongest links between the present and whatever happened before. Suddenly, Victor's old role is becoming unstable. Because if everyone starts remembering, Victor is no longer the only keeper of the past. And maybe that is why the boy in white is becoming more active. Look at what happens whenever the residents get close to a deeper layer of the mystery. Something changes. A warning appears. A vision arrives. A memory returns. A path opens. The town reacts. It is almost as if the environment itself is responding to their understanding. That suggests the mystery isn't passive. The town doesn't simply contain secrets. It may actively protect them. And if the boy in white is connected to that system, then his actions become much harder to classify as good or evil. Maybe he is trying to help. But helping the residents doesn't necessarily mean helping them escape. Sometimes helping someone means keeping them alive long enough to reach a specific moment. And that could explain Victor perfectly. Victor wasn't rescued. He was preserved. That's a much darker idea. Because preservation means someone had a purpose for him. And if someone had a purpose for Victor, then his survival was never entirely his own. This also explains why Victor is so uncomfortable with change. He wants the trees to remain where they are. He wants objects untouched. He becomes deeply disturbed when people interfere with things he believes are connected to the past. To everyone else, it can look like trauma. And it is trauma. But perhaps trauma isn't the entire explanation. Maybe Victor has learned something through experience that the others haven't. Maybe he understands that the town's objects are not just objects. They are anchors. Move the wrong thing, open the wrong door, change the wrong location, and something responds. That's why the bottle tree warning matters so much. The boy in white doesn't simply tell Victor that something bad might happen. He acts as though disturbing the tree violates a rule. And rules are everywhere and from. The monsters follow rules. The talismans follow rules. The tunnels follow rules. The visions follow patterns. The cycles follow patterns. Even death doesn't appear to work normally. So perhaps the boy in white is another part of that rule system. He cannot simply do whatever he wants. Victor may have been chosen because he understands rules intuitively. He watches. He remembers. He notices repetition. He doesn't need to understand the science behind something to know that touching it is dangerous. That makes him uniquely suited to surviving this place. But it also means Victor may have misunderstood the boy in white's role for decades. Victor sees a protector. What if the boy in white is actually a guide? Those are not the same thing. A protector keeps you safe. A guide takes you somewhere. And a guide doesn't always care whether the journey hurts. This distinction could explain every strange moment between them. The boy in white doesn't save Victor from everything. He guides him through specific moments. He appears when Victor needs to move. He disappears when Victor has reached the next stage.
He doesn't stay.
He doesn't explain. He doesn't take responsibility for what happens afterward. That is exactly how a guide behaves. And if the boy in white is guiding Victor toward something, then the entire story may have been moving toward one final purpose: a confrontation with the truth. But here's the final twist. Victor may not be the person who is chosen to solve the mystery. He may be the person chosen to make sure someone else could solve it. That someone could be Tabitha. It could be Jade. It could be Julie. Or it could be someone who hasn't yet understood their role. Because Victor's greatest contribution may not be his knowledge. It may be his ability to recognize what has happened before. When everyone else sees something for the first time, Victor can look at it and say, "I've seen this." That makes him the bridge between cycles, between generations, between memories, between the people who came before and the people who are here now. And perhaps that is why the boy in white chose him. Victor is the thread that connects the entire story. Break that thread, and the town's history disappears. But follow it, and eventually you reach the beginning. And that may be exactly what the boy in white has been waiting for. Because the boy in white may not be trying to keep Victor trapped. He may be trying to make sure Victor survives long enough to witness the moment when the cycle finally changes. Which creates one terrifying possibility. What if the boy in white knows that Victor is not supposed to leave the town? What if Victor's purpose is to remain until the end? Not as a prisoner, not as a hero, but as the final witness. The one person who can look at the ending and remember the beginning. And if that is true, then Victor's relationship with the boy in white becomes tragic. The boy in white may genuinely care about him, but he may also need him. And those two things can exist at the same time. That's what makes the relationship so disturbing. Because the most dangerous person in From may not be the one who lies to Victor. It may be the one Victor trusts completely. The boy in white has never needed to control Victor. He only needed Victor to believe him. And after all these years, Victor still does. So maybe the real mystery was never, why did the boy in white choose Victor? Maybe the answer is much darker. He chose Victor because Victor was the only person who could carry the town's memory without destroying it. The only survivor capable of remembering what everyone else forgot. The only person who could preserve the clues until the right people arrived. And perhaps the only person who could eventually lead them back to the truth. But if Victor was chosen to preserve the past, then someone else may have been chosen to change it. And when that person finally understands why the boy in white needed Victor all along, the entire history of the town could be rewritten. Because maybe Victor was never the destination. Maybe he was the key. And the boy in white has been carrying that key toward one final door. The terrifying question is, what happens when that door finally opens?